Hi, listeners. We've reached episode 50 of the main series. I'm not counting the mini-series as part of the main numbers. But to celebrate this momentous occasion, I thought that we will do another episode of Tables Turned. So enjoy.
It's my turn.
It's your turn.
Should be a good one, huh?
Peter, hello. It's my turn to ask questions now.
Hi. Should I be worried?
So you want to answer a question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I have one. It's a tricky one.
It's a tricky one.
It starts off with me, but it's going to be shifting over to you very quickly.
I do have a question I always wanted to ask you.
Oh, always wanted to.
Yeah.
And you waited to this moment.
Yeah.
Oh, well, what about the question for you? When do I get
That's
to
after
ask
that.
that?
It's a separate recording.
Sorry. All right.
It's fine. I still have 23 hours of recording time, so you have 23 hours to figure it
I
out.
don't. You have a flight today. If we sat here for 23 hours for me trying to figure out how to phrase this question, you'd be really angry with me.
I'm your host, Peter Marcus Bach, and this is the Grand Challenges Podcast. We've come a long way, learning about a lot of different topics and many inspiring stories. It's time once again for my guests to turn the tables on me with their own curious questions. So sit back and enjoy as I reflect on the cities I've lived in, my experience in academia, nature, music, and my own career journey thus far. Please enjoy. Welcome to another special episode, listeners. And first and foremost, thank you so much for all the support you've given me over the past few years with this podcast. I recently went to 2 different conferences, one in Switzerland and one in Austria. And many of you came to me and told me how much you liked the show and how you've been listening to it. So if you are listening in, thank you so much for that. It means a lot to me. So Tables Turned, how does it work? We've had one episode already. If you haven't listened to it, it's episode 36, where you can learn a bit more about the origin story of this podcast and myself. But every guest got to ask me a question of their choosing. We recorded that separately after their main episode. And I have compiled many of these questions based on topics, similarities, into one single episode. It's a chance to revisit all the different guests we've had on the show and to learn a bit more about me, any advice I would offer myself, and just to have fun as well. In the first episode of Tables Turned, we had 22 different questions. This episode will feature 26 different questions, and I guess you can group them into 4 distinct groups. Firstly, we'll have questions about my life, different cities I've lived in, and knowledge of these cities or lack thereof. So, foreshadowing there. Then how my career has developed and where it's heading, some reflections on that, and I guess visions for the future. A deeper dive into academia and blue-green infrastructures. That's been one of the most dominant topics on the show. And finally, some miscellaneous topics. So things about music, which has been quite close to my heart. Some advice on grit and resilience as well from myself. You can also treat this episode as a bit of a catalog in case you're not sure who to listen to. This is a chance to, I guess, make a first impression of some of the guests that we've had on the show as well. And I'll be referring to the episode numbers as we go through the questions. But otherwise, I would suggest we get started. There's a lot to get through this time. So without further ado, let's start with the questions. The first question, or shall I say non-question, and you'll see why, comes from John Hathaway from episode 24. Here's what he asked me.
Okay, Peter, so we're early on in 2024 now, and I have to ask you, what is your New Year's resolution?
Actually, I just realized you can't because the question episode is not time-based. I don't know when I'm going to release all the questions episode because the idea is these questions get compiled.
All right.
It's like, what was your New
What was your New Year's resolution?
And did you keep it?
2024.
2027 episode comes out and I'm like, I can't remember. This question shows you a bit about the production process. John's episode was actually recorded in 2023, December, and came out in 2024. So we already had to make it seem like it was 2024. And then I realized the question could not be time sensitive. Nevertheless, I thought I'd answer this question anyway for 2025, because in December 2024, I was reflecting heavily on the past few years of my journey, because this year in 2025, I actually started my own company. So a major shift from what I had been used to in the academic world, now going solo and doing the things I love. And in December 2024, I wrote my resolution for 2025 down on a piece of paper and put it in an envelope. And it's in my drawer next to my bedside, and I'm not looking at it until the end of this year. But one of the items that I wrote was to create more interesting episodes, keep the quality, if not improve it, of this podcast, and to even start the mini-series. And it's been progressing really well. So excited to see how many of these items that I've set for myself almost 12 months ago will have been fulfilled. And I guess the key thing about resolutions is, it's about the mindset. So if you want to make them, don't be too disappointed if you don't meet them. But the key is to give yourself a direction for the year ahead. And that's what I'll be doing once we reach December 2025 for the next year in 2026. So let's move on to another lighthearted question before we get serious. And this comes from Daniele la Cecilia, all the way back from episode 10, and is about a topic that has come up in passing on many episodes of the podcast. Listen in.
After listening to this podcast, would you keep on killing your plants then?
Would I keep on killing my plants? Well, I guess you mentioned the importance of collaboration, right? So I hope my plants collaborate with me on keeping themselves alive, right? No, I think I certainly plan to set up a herb garden again. And hopefully this time, through that process, I learn a bit more about how to take care of them. Yeah, if not, I guess, I can make a lot of nice salads with balsamic vinegar that hopefully you will send me. I will. But no, I certainly learned a lot more about taking care of houseplants. So hopefully some of this becomes useful as I move forward into my botanist's journey or gardener's journey.
Happy to hear that.
It's been about 2 years since we recorded this question. And I guess I'm happy to say that one of my plants, a calamonden tree, survived one of the winters and has been growing new leaves this year. Can't say I've improved overall. Well, maybe incrementally, but I've learned a lot more about gardening. But as you would have heard on other episodes, I still struggle with it. I don't know whether it's because on a balcony it's not the best to grow plants, or I'm dealing with lots of different pests and don't have the tools for that, or I don't prune the plants. But nevertheless, I'm still doing my best, and I plan to keep tending to the garden. I certainly have made quite a lot of good salads. So yeah, Daniele, if you're listening in, I'm still expecting that bottle of balsamic vinegar. So hope to see you soon. Do come visit. Let me know when you're in Switzerland. Now, let's move on to a broader topic, which is about the places I've lived in and visited and what I think about them and how much I know of them. Here's Bill Hunt from episode 33.
Peter, I know you've been all over the world. What's your favorite place?
Oh, it's hard to pick one favorite place. But I think reflecting back on our episode, we talked about this idea of having pilgrimages, personal pilgrimages. It's funny, but for the longest time, I wanted to visit Japan. And my research career began with me preparing for a conference in Tokyo. So, that was sort of the first fulfillment. I remember shortly after that, I always wanted to see Venice. And as soon as I started my PhD, I got to go to Austria for 3 months to do research with a group there. And made it over to Venice. And I think there's always these little moments where you find a place that you really want to see. Probably the most recent one being, for more than 10 years, 14 years, I had been planning to visit the Greek islands. And just this summer vacation, I got to go to Crete with my wife, and we had a great holiday there. So after 14 years of planning, or at least thinking, I should probably find a way to go there. So I think there's a few.
Those are great places. The only one I've been to of the three, other than Narita Airport, that doesn't count, is Venice. I've been to Venice. I love Venice. But I do want to go to the Greek islands. So you're a good guy, Peter.
No, definitely recommend it. Definitely in summer, it's quite beautiful. So, and do the cultural tours, because I'm sure the Greek water infrastructure will also rival the Romans. Some of the ideas they had in the early days.
Well, if it does, I will be delighted.
Definitely.
Life update, I also got to add Mykonos to the list of Greek islands that I've visited this year. So definitely recommend going there. Very good food, very good weather, and just absolutely enjoyable. Let's look into the places that I have lived in, and that with a question from Patri Cuervo from episode 38.
Peter, hello. It's my turn to ask you questions now.
Hi. Should I be worried?
Not really. No. Living in different countries make you create your own world, so you don't fit in one country or in another country. I have a good friend who described it as different in a matrix.
Oh.
So you pick and choose the things that you want, that you like, or that work for you. So do you have the same feeling? And what is your matrix? What have you picked up from different countries? What have you kept?
A very interesting question of reflection as well. Oof.
Well, I guess the first thing is, do you feel like you live in a matrix where you're not fully in one place or the other, or you fully belong to one place or the other?
It certainly feels like that sometimes.
Yeah.
I think that you will always take bits and pieces from every place you've lived.
Definitely.
So that's definitely one aspect.
Okay.
And then do you have a second guiding question just to sum it up a bit?
Yeah, no, it was... how is your matrix? What have you kept from your home country, and what have you adopted that you took along with you from your new countries? I know that you've been living in different places, not just two places. So it's a little bit of how that have shaped your own world.
It's a very interesting and deep question of reflection from Patri. And I guess if I had to answer it in a much clearer way, yes, I've lived in Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, Melbourne, Australia, and now Zurich, Switzerland. I've spent also a considerable amount of my time in Innsbruck, Austria. So many places, many experiences, and all of them very eye-opening. Yeah, you always feel different when you come to a new place. You don't feel like you fit in, but you slowly establish a circle of friends, and I still keep in contact with many of them across the world. But yeah, you take something with whenever you move. And I suppose, Singapore, Malaysia would be the food, would be the culture, mainly the food. The food is so good, so much that I learned how to cook a lot of it during my time in Melbourne and Switzerland. I got better at it in Switzerland. And then I guess from Australia, well, people always say that when I speak English, I sound quite Australian. So maybe that's stuck with me. Coffee culture, of course, from Melbourne. And now in Switzerland, I guess, I've settled into the lifestyle here, and it's really a case of seeing where that takes me. I don't plan on moving anytime soon, but if I move, then it'll be interesting to see what part of the matrix that also fills. Perhaps one thing that hasn't quite grown onto me in Switzerland and that I didn't take with me from Australia is the outdoor culture. Certainly something I want to explore in the near future. And here's a question from John, the actual question from John that touches upon this.
How about hiking? I'm always interested in where people hike.
Sure.
All right, Peter. So my question for you is, if I go to Switzerland, what is the place I need to visit for good hiking?
It's a very funny question because I have this habit of not necessarily going to look at the country I live in, but rather countries around it, which is funny. But I can definitely, in terms of hiking, I'm not someone who goes off the beaten track much, and maybe I should do that a lot more in future. But certainly going up some of the key mountains there, like the Pilatus near Lucerne, they offer some really nice views and incredible vistas of the lakes and the mountain ranges. So you can definitely look into that. And I'm very sure that there are tons of hiking trails there. But other than that, once I go on a hike and actually go on a proper hike, I will let you know. So the other interesting thing about me and hiking is actually I'm more of an urban person. So I just tend to walk ridiculous amounts of steps in cities that I visit.
Oh, that's funny.
So when I look at my fitness tracker and I look at the steps I've done, I remember there was one day in Shanghai, I think I did 35,000 steps that day.
Jeez.
It was nuts. I know I got to the airport that evening to fly off, and I know my legs were just completely tired. So I'm more of that kind of person, but I will certainly try and do some hikes in Switzerland so that I can give you a proper answer in the near future.
I am curious what you do for fun.
What do I do for fun? Well, the podcast. Lately, my wife and I have been building lots of Lego.
Nice.
I play board games, photography, videography, although I should do that more. Yeah, and otherwise, I like to go to visit places. Like last year, my wife and I went to a lot of castles, historical sites. This year, it's been more traveling around different cities. So when we have a chance, we just go see the cities. So travel mainly. But then if I'm in Switzerland, it's mainly these board games or the podcast or things like that, creative kind of aspects.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. The podcast is definitely a passion project, a hobby of mine, allowing me to be creative, to experiment a bit, always trying new things. And yeah, other than that, as I mentioned, hiking, definitely on my list. So listeners, if you have tips of places to start, I've heard of one hike around the Kleine Scheideck. At least that's the name of the place I heard. So anyone familiar with that, feel free to suggest anything and I'll try it out and then talk about it on a future episode of the podcast. In relation to Switzerland, another question came from one of my guests from Australia, who was also the first guest on the topic of transport. Listening to what Alexa Delbosc has to say from episode 28.
One of the stereotypes that transport researchers have about Switzerland is that they have a great train system and the trains always run on time and they connect all of the villages no matter how big or small. Is that true?
Interesting question. Good reflection piece for me as well. So the first thing that came to mind when you asked that question was I've read somewhere that Switzerland has recently reported they have some of the slowest trains in Europe. But I think for connectivity, yeah, I would say it's pretty easy to get around with the train system. And some places you can't reach by car at all because it's up in the mountains. So you can't even drive. So you have to switch from train to, I guess, vernacular or other kinds of modes of transport to get up the altitude.
Wow.
Yeah. But in terms of connectivity, I think, yeah, it's pretty good. Fairly easy to get around with the ticketing system as well. So you buy a ticket based on where you need to go. And depending on, if you're in inner city areas, you can get the local tickets there. Otherwise, you get the general ticket, which allows you to travel between cities. And it's, pretty well connected. You can get across the country. Okay, mind you, the country's not that big compared to others, but you can get across the country in 2-3 hours and often fairly direct with minimal stops. So yeah, glad you asked about the Swiss train system. If you had asked about the German one, I'd have a very different opinion, but that's a story for another time. I have no complaints of the Swiss train system. I'm pretty happy with it. It gets me places, and sometimes it's the only way you can get to certain places in the country. They're very comfortable, so do enjoy the bistro cart, or if you get a train with a very big skylight, do enjoy the views as well. So yeah, check it out for yourself. The ticket goes a long way. And if you're in Switzerland, you can also look for these day passes where you can access all the public transport across the country with a few limitations, but it's definitely worth it. In comparison, I remember the train systems in Melbourne, which were also good, but because the city was so much bigger, it took a lot longer to get around. So in relation to Melbourne, here's a question from Jarrod Luxton from episode 44.
I'm curious, what's the biggest difference between living in Melbourne and Zurich?
Dare I say the coffee? Well, the coffee culture is certainly different.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the biggest difference, other than the climate, the fact that there's snow, which is very beautiful at times, I must say.
Yeah.
So from the physical aspects and the visual aspects and the facilities, that's definitely different. Yeah, a bit more compact here, easier to to get to places. I mean, in Melbourne, you have to, as you said on our episode, you have to drive like 2 hours till you're in some nature area.
Yeah.
And Zurich is a lot more convenient in that regard. Certainly, you do get mocked if you call the hill out next to the city a mountain, which I have a tendency to do. But definitely, definitely different. But I think I would say the first thing that came to mind was coffee.
Nice. Yeah. I struggle with I think if you're coming from Melbourne, no matter where you go, you might struggle with the change in coffee culture, perhaps. So I've struggled with that too.
No, you get spoiled in Melbourne. Yeah. Although barista culture has taken off here now in recent years, so you can get a very good flat white.
That's good to hear.
Good tip, listeners. If you ever want to taste coffee beans and you're not a black coffee drinker, then get a flat white. The coffee culture has certainly taken off, and compared to 8 years ago, it's much better here in Switzerland now. But yeah, I guess another difference would be if you compare the two cities, Zurich and Melbourne. Melbourne is just that much bigger, so you feel like getting around takes a bit longer. It's very, very spacious, and sometimes it's too big. I certainly know that whenever I have to go to the airport in Zurich, it's a very short ride of 20 minutes by tram compared to an hour by taxi from where I used to live in Melbourne. So definitely a big contrast there. So João Leitão was the first guest on the show, and he came on for a part 2 in episode 40, which means that he got to ask me another question. Here it is.
What do you think are the advantages of living in an European country versus living in Asia where you've grown up?
A very interesting reflection. And I guess, do you mean in terms of the way of life, or in terms of, I guess, efficiency, getting around, transport, or
how people live? How has been your experience having lived in Singapore and now a few years already in Switzerland?
Definitely interesting reflection. I think that first thought that came to mind is the level of busyness. I mean, Singapore, growing up there, I mean, I haven't been back since 2003, but, Malaysia being similar, and then, comparing that with the cities in Australia, the speed of life, the bustliness of the city, how fast things go, how fast and how, the frequency of public transports, for example, the queues you have to deal with, the population densities you got to face. I think this all has, even though it doesn't appear like it, it does have an effect on, how you perceive the world on a daily basis. And I think since coming to Europe, I've become calmer. I feel like I'm calmer, and I'm happy with that. And I remember when I was younger, I thought to myself, nah, I'm not going to live in Europe. It's too slow. It's too different. But I've gotten used to it. So I guess listeners, be careful. If you ever say you're not going to do something, you might end up doing it. So
definitely this is something that we should learn, because I also said that after visiting London for the first time, without my parents, I said, well, I arrived home and saying this is not a place for me to live. And then a few years later, I ended up living there for 4 years doing the PhD.
So
but it's good. It's, I think, also for you having these two experiences.
True.
Growing up in an Asian country, coming now, having experience in Australia as well, but also in Europe.
I was going to say, you're leaving out Australia.
No. I want to include Australia.
Yes.
But gives you a diverse perspective of what is a normal life in different cultures.
I was going to say, in different cultures, yeah. There's a sense of normality and different definitions of it. But I think it teaches you mostly to have an open mind and be open to this, because that is what also shapes the experience and shapes you.
Definitely something to keep throughout your life, or our life,
Definitely.
Our lives.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, reflections of places I've lived in, and also my lack of knowledge of hiking in Switzerland, and I guess more indoor hobbies. Here's a question from Denise Mitrano from episode 34, which puts that on top of its head.
So, Peter, we've talked a lot about how I like to do long-distance bike rides, getting out into the cold in the north of Norway, sleeping in tents. So what is your next big challenge physically that you want to be able to do?
Next big challenge physically? Oof. There's carrying a bunch of books up 3 floors of a building count? No. No. Well, I have done bike riding in the past, to be honest. My bike needs a ride again. So I have been thinking of looking for a spot to go riding around Switzerland. I'll have to get my wife a bike first as well, but that's on the cards. So we've been thinking about that. We did get rollerblades fairly recently. So we've been trying, that physical exercise. And apart from that, given that the summer months are still around and it's a bit warm, at least at the time we recorded this question, I have brought up my stand-up paddle as well. And I have heard that you can do fairly long paddles, and I haven't tried. So I figured, between learning how to balance on the paddle and, actually using the paddle, I guess they say go into the deep end and just try to do a 7-kilometer or 9-kilometer paddle in the shortest amount of time. So maybe that could be my challenge, and I'll let you know how that goes.
Oh, man, that's 3 big challenges all in a row. Okay, I like that you're, biting off a lot all at once.
Let's just say I give myself options and I get to pick from there.
Fair.
Thank you for the question. And I'm glad I gave myself options, because life update, my wife got herself a bike and we have been doing some bike rides. Maybe not as long as we'd like to, but we're slowly warming up to the idea. I think this summer we also escaped to the pool a lot, so didn't have a chance to actually get out my stand-up paddle. And before you know it, summer disappeared and we're now in autumn. But I guess that will be the next plan for the next summer. So yeah, stay tuned. Moving on, there were also a bunch of questions about my own perceptions of academia and opinions, having been in academia since 2010, having done my PhD before that. So let's dive into some of these, starting with Katrin Pakizer from episode 29.
We talked about how the academic world is and how collaboration is such a big part. And I was wondering, like, maybe you can answer that. Like, why is science so competitive and why is it not more collaborative? I think we could create such a safe space to a certain degree where we don't have the same principles of like the private sector repeated, right? So why are we not changing?
Yeah. Wow, that's a deep question. If we start from age-old institutions, a lot of academic performance is based on this idea of publishing the next big thing. And I think in history, the one who was there first is the one who gets all the fame and glory. It's only if you dig deeper do you realize that, certain famous theories were actually researched in parallel and came out almost at the same time. Some major findings as well. And I don't think that tradition has changed. I think we're still in that kind of, you need to innovate, you need to be the first in the door, or at least nowadays with social media, I feel like you need to be the first to be noticed as well in what you do. And if we have an academic institution that is based on this idea that you need to publish or perish, which is just as much alive nowadays. And I feel it's getting worse because you're just seeing an explosion of papers. It makes things very hard. It provides an opportunity for collaboration because if you collaborate and you do good work, you publish together. And sometimes I see projects that I review that will be able to produce more research, but is producing more really the answer? I think it's just feeding the fire. Yeah, I don't know if I have a good answer for that, but I certainly believe that collaboration is an important factor in building new knowledge. And I don't know, maybe it's intuition, but I feel that in coming years, this is going to be the way forward because we need interdisciplinarity. We need synergies, as we've spoken about on our episode.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Like, I'm just always puzzled, like how we repeat certain things that just can be very much observed in the private sector, just repeat them in academia, where I don't think it is necessary because as you just mentioned, I think it is like really true innovative ideas will be born out of collaboration. And if you look at papers that really made an impact, there are a lot of times in collaboration with other scientists.
Yep, I can certainly agree.
And I hope that could kind of inspire also changing work conditions and how we engage with each other, like what career paths we have in store for people. If that could be the starting point, that would be really nice.
I certainly agree. I started my own company this year, so it would seem that I left the academic space, but I actually haven't. I'm still active. I'm still publishing. I'm still the editor of a journal. And I guess I'm doing it in my own way, if you want to call it that. Because I do enjoy research. I do enjoy doing the science and making an impact with that and finding new knowledge. But yeah, I guess for the time being, let's see what it's like observing it more from the outside. In relation to that, Luis Sañudo from episode 32 also had a question about academia.
Peter, what are the challenges that you consider both the most complicated for you to overcome in academia and at the same time the ones that you are looking for in order to develop personally and from a career standpoint?
That's a very reflective and great question. Yeah, it reminds me a lot about my own journey, which is definitely a non-linear journey, like I think many other people on the show and many other people in life. But I think like many, I foresaw the difficulties of academia. On our episode, we discussed a lot of it in terms of the publish or perish stereotype, as well as, the competitiveness and the fact that there's not as many jobs as there are people vying for it. I think from the very early stages of my career after the PhD, I decided that the value of academia for me has been to always try to make impact with the work. I'm an engineer. I'm not a scientist. Let's say that. I studied engineering and I went into research. And really a lot of that is applied research. As an engineer, you try to make things work. And I think when it comes to then shaping academia to suit your training, your understanding of the world, for me it was, I want to create new knowledge, but I want to make sure that knowledge is used in practical ways. And so I said, papers are important. They build credibility, but so is trying to make the knowledge actionable. How do I communicate it to the world? How do I create ways to get people to access the knowledge? Oftentimes papers sit behind a wall. They're difficult to access. They're long to read. And so from very early stages, I went for diversity. And this, of course, has been a challenge. I enjoy multidisciplinary work. I enjoy diversity, but I think it just hasn't matched the traditional lens of what academia should be, which is you have to be good in one thing. Your label has to be very specific. Blue-green infrastructures, I'm finding, is not specific enough. It has to be, in water, that in biodiversity, in something specific there. But you know what? All in all, if I look at my journey where I'm at now, I feel like, well, I think I've gotten to where I want it to be. I think I've gotten to a stable position where you can do what you set out to define yourself as. It's been a very interesting journey, but I think it's something to look back on very fondly and say, well, I think I made the right choice to diversify. And I'm looking forward to pursuing that further. I guess I read a book by famous author Naval Ravikant, famous venture capitalist. And in that book, The Almanac, well, he didn't write it, but a lot of people who liked him wrote it. One of the key quotes is the most powerful job in the world is the applied scientist, according to him, which I kind of agree with, because apart from doing the academic research and the knowledge, you're not stuck in the ivory tower. And we've had many discussions of the ivory tower on the show, but you're actually making an effort to get out. And I guess that's a moment I can look back proudly and say, I'm one of those who wants to get out, who wants to push, whether it's through the podcast, whether it's through the work I'm doing to implement things that I research, or whether it's through mentoring students that later go out into industry or stay in academia, but shape it in their own ways and have power over their decisions, no matter what comes at them. So, yeah.
Well, I'm so happy to hear that, Peter. Really proud to share moments with people like you.
Oh, thank you.
In academia. I think that we share many things, but particularly this latest thing that you talk about, so important.
Building a community.
If I'm not going to be allowed to be myself or do something I wouldn't stay in, sometimes you have to go through these situations in academia just to force your way. Because of the traditional way. I'm in a really old-fashioned university right now. It's great. People are great. But it's so traditional that, as you said, we need challenges to thrive, to keep growing, and navigating life. So that was a great answer. A really good one.
To quote a very cliche quote, where there's a will, there's a way. I think it's important to understand why you're doing what you're doing, to be really passionate about the reason for the research that you're doing, and to just keep going. As challenging as it may be, just keep going, keep looking forward, and opportunities will present themselves. And that's what I've certainly experienced this year with my company, Eden CT. It was slow to start with, but things are slowly picking up. But the most important thing is you have to be moving. So keep moving. On the topic of research and researching what you want, let's hear from Megan Farrelly, all the way back from episode 8.
So, Peter, my question for you does pull on a question I think that you asked me in the process, and it draws on that. So I'd love to know what you envisage if you were not constrained by resources, not constrained by time, what your perfect research project would look like in the contemporary moment. So thinking about the problems we face now, thinking about the situations that we're in, what would your perfect research project look like right now?
No constraints on resources or time. That would be perfect, actually. I would love that. Yeah, what would the perfect research project be? I guess growing up a lot, I loved SimCity, and I'm in city planning, trying to create more livable cities. So I think it would be something in that domain. But after a lot of the things I've learned from you and going through a lot of social science research as well of my own, you really start to see the value in engaging stakeholders and keeping them interested and bringing them along for the ride on all your, design and planning projects. So I think it would involve something along those lines. I also think modeling. I do modeling because it's a very powerful tool to make the science accessible. And so I think it would be a combination of that, where I would just, call it build the next social network of city planning, and something where you can really just get people involved to shape the cities of the future the way that we want it to, and then hopefully implement that. And this kind of tool or ultimate platform, I think, should be something that we ensure is secure, it's customizable, it's interactable, and it really provides, some, call it a digital twin. Nowadays we talk about digital twins, but maybe something even more than that, something that we can then really use to guide the planning of cities for the future. And I know it takes a lot of resources to set that up. And when I say, planning, I don't just mean in my own domains, water and nature-based solutions, but really moving beyond that into the energy, into the transport space. I think things that really allow us to then, create co-designed cities of the future. I think that would be the ultimate research project.
Excellent.
Future planning of your career, very common question in job interviews when people ask, where do you see yourself in X years? And two guests, almost 2 years apart, have asked some variant of this question, and now it's time to answer it. We have Liah Coggins from episode 12 and Nadja Kunz from episode 49. Listen into how they phrase this question, especially how Liah phrased this question.
Question for you, Pete. If you were to reflect on the last 5 years, what would you change? No, I don't like that. I don't like how I phrase that. No, I got it.
Okay.
Reflecting on your, the last 5 to 10 years of your career, what is a lesson from there that you would like to change moving forward for the next 5 to 10 years? Does that make sense? No, that doesn't make sense.
It does, but...
how I phrased it does not make sense.
Okay, try again.
I'm not going well here.
It's fine. I still have 23 hours of recording time, so you have 23 hours to figure it out.
I don't. You have a flight to take. If we sat here for 23 hours from me trying to figure out how to phrase this question, you'd be really angry with me. What is something you have learnt from the last 5 to 10 years of your career that you want to change or work on in the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh, that's a tough one. There's so many things I've learned in the last 5 to 10 years, but I think, if I think about it.
Glad I could get you back with a hard question now.
Yeah, you stumped me there.
This is the moment you've been waiting for. Give me your best shot. Ask me a question.
All right. I'm going to ask you the question that I find very helpful when mentors ask me this question. Not that I'm necessarily your mentor, but I love the question because it makes you think about where you want to go next. So I want to know what you want to be doing in 5 years, Peter. You've taken a bit of a career deviation yourself, and for now you're working in your own space, in your own business, which is extremely exciting, and congratulations for that.
Thank you.
I'd love to know where you want it to take you in 5 years, 10 years.
Yeah, just like we've discussed on your episode, the journey is definitely non-linear.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one mission definitely is to bring tools to the industry to help quantify the things that, perhaps the research shows that we have intuition about, an inkling of. But I feel like, my area of practice, trying to build blue-green cities, sponge cities, whatever you want to call it, using nature-based solutions. What we're really missing are the tools that can help bridge the disciplines, bridge the stakeholders, the architects, the planners, the municipalities, even the community. And, I think what excites me is when I do the modeling, when I do the mapping and I build some interesting features, with programming, I always get excited about not what it looks like. I mean, it looks snazzy, but I always get excited about the potential it has to, awaken interest in people, to leave a lasting impression, to sort of remind people of the challenges we face, and then how we can actually solve this with, a whole toolbox available. It's at our fingertips. I think in many episodes of the podcast, we've already said that the technology is there, but what's missing is really the social side or the economic side. And I think with tools like that, and hopefully in the next 5 years, some of this will emerge from what I'm embarking on now with my company, Eden CT. And so hopefully, in that time, we can start launching some of the first tools. So if anyone's interested in hearing this, do get in touch. Let's have a chat.
That's very exciting. I am very excited to see what those tools look like and to follow your path. I think it will be a great journey wherever it takes you. So wishing you all the best.
Thank you. And I think on a similar note or in parallel, as I was answering the question, I'm also thinking about the journey you took and what you said on your episode, that sometimes it's not clear cut how you're going to proceed. And there's all sorts of moving parts. And in a way, I'm also faced with a lot of conflicting directions and also just forks in the road. And so, it's something that I'm actively grappling with, and hopefully we'll be able to then find the right pathway going forward. But I guess it's a lot of iteration. I think starting your own business is not easy, but with mentors, with a good network, good contacts, I feel that I'm in a lovely position, and I feel very fortunate to be able to then rely and seek out advice and seek out ideas and just, bounce off ideas with my friends across the world. So, yeah.
Great. Well, that's really good advice as well, because I think it's also about enjoying the journey, not just the destination. So you've definitely highlighted that.
Definitely. Thanks for the question.
All right.
I think if I had tried to answer Liah's question 2 years ago when she asked it to me, I think just 2 years ahead, the answer would no longer have applied. So, it's very unpredictable where your life's going to take you. But to come back to the things that I've learned in the last 5 years, if I had to boil it down, it's not about the skills, it's not about the knowledge that you obtain. I think this should be an ongoing process. But I think the biggest thing that I've learned, and I'm still learning over the last 5 years, is really patience. Having patience, learning to deal with patience, and I guess being resilient about that and learning to sit with the patience and doing your stuff. As I said earlier, keep moving and moving incrementally every day. If you create a small habit, that builds up and compounds over time. So small steps, but having patience and not trying to rush things. I think that's probably one of the most important things that you can learn and anyone can learn. So, practice patience, and sometimes take a leap of faith as well. Life will tell you when. Let's go all the way back to episode 2 with Scott Lloyd, who had the following question for me.
So you want to answer a question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I have one. It's a tricky one. It starts off with me, but it's going to be shifting over to you very, very quickly.
Okay.
But the idea is that as a designer, I'm interested in having adequate level of information in order to work on proposals together.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm working on proposals together. We can bridge a lot of differences in how we work, our professional languages, and even our values, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, there's someone who works across so many disciplines and always sort of assumes the role of connecting the dots. The information is often crucial. Projects we've worked on together, I think it's been very important to understand how different disciplines communicate. You as an architect, the kind of information that you need or use, the kind of tools that you have, how they are compatible with the tools I have. I don't think you can get all of that from day one. I think it's a learning experience. But I think that is also a good thing because it sort of says if you commit to collaborate together, I think you're also committing for the long term because it just gets easier with project after project. I think you start to learn how the other person works, how the other person thinks, operates, whether I think in numbers or in maps or in images. And I don't think you can do it from day one. And it's going to be iterative like design always is, like any kind of analysis is. But I think if you commit to trying to be open, understanding how different disciplines communicate, then it'll come. You don't even have to worry whether it will come. It will come.
Cool.
Let's switch over to the topic of nature and much of the research I do on nature in cities, blue-green infrastructures, but also what nature means to me. Earlier this year, we featured Gobatti, perhaps the most philosophical and spiritual episode on the podcast to date. You can check it out in episode 39, but Lucas had one simple question for me.
So, a question of my choice. What is nature to you?
What is nature to me? I hold a very close connection to nature. I think if anything, the pandemic definitely showed this the most, but I've always felt close to nature. I think it's a place of calm. I think when I started meditation and delving into meditation, I always enjoyed meditating outside, just being near a flowing creek, a river, just drinking my coffee near a flowing river has always been wonderful for me, relaxing. And I think maybe that's also part of the inspiration why I research on nature and cities, why my work revolves around that, and why I care to try and, create more vibrant cities with lots of nature and green infrastructure, blue and green. So, I think it's something that I've connected with all my life, especially having lived in different countries and in different climates and different ecosystems. thinking tropical rainforests of Asia, where I used to do lots of walks through the forests. Then, the Australian landscape, very different, drier, but also quite lush at times. And now in Switzerland as well, where admittedly I have yet to get out more, but that's the plan, I'm planning on that. And yeah, it's been something that I respect a lot. I find really grounds me and connects me with not just who I am, but also, I guess, just the realization that you're part of a larger system, a larger world, and that you should protect that.
Nice. Yeah, that was good.
The topic of nature was featured a lot on the podcast in different forms, in particular, blue-green infrastructures or nature-based solutions. We've had the terminology discussion many times. So in regards to that topic, here's a question from Danielle Dagenais from episode 21.
Which blue-green infrastructure or which cities do you find more inspiring in terms of blue-green infrastructure?
I mean, I've been to many places and I've got to see different ways in which they've, I guess, stylized it. And I don't think there's one place necessarily that really has the most beautiful or the best or whatsoever. But I guess in terms of what fascinates me, I think what Switzerland is trying to do in terms of their blue-green infrastructure is quite interesting because it's trying to integrate greenery into the dense European environments. But having said that, I still enjoy how Australia designs these lush natures and really brings in a lot of the vegetation. Where I would like to go, but for many reasons cannot, is Singapore.
Yeah, of course, it's an example.
To see how they have really taken it upon themselves to rip out concrete drains and build lush rivers and restore that. How they've been able to create gardens and to implement rules like replacing 100% of site area with greenery and to just create this urban forest. I think it's something I would definitely love to see at some point, and let's see if the future makes it possible.
I hope so.
My first inspiration for blue-green infrastructures came from looking at some of the study notes for fourth year engineering back at Monash University in Australia. So yeah, it's been a journey since then, learning a bit more about how it's done across the world. And yes, Singapore is a bit of a challenge for me, but we had someone on the show who got to work on such projects in Singapore during his career. Here's what he asked me, Tobias Bauer from episode 30.
Yeah, Peter. So now it's my turn to ask you one question. So my question would be, what is the biggest difference between water-sensitive urban design in Australia and the sponge city concept in Switzerland? Are there certain differences or, maybe?
That's a very nice question, actually. And if I had to think of it on the spot now, I think, first of all, when you think of the concept in Australia, it also depends on which city you're in and what some of the dominant practices are. But I guess water-sensitive urban design, if we go back to the fundamental concepts, relates to ecologically sustainable development. So it's more than just, managing water. It's about designing the urban environment to be sustainable through water management. So providing that ecosystem services that people talk about. So that's inherent. But how it's done, I guess it differs based on cities. In Switzerland, I think I'm almost tempted to say the sponge cities concept is a bit more, in a way, set. There's a lot of possibilities, similar ideas, ecosystem services. But we seem to target water quantity, heat, and biodiversity in the process, and then also through that water quality. And there seems to be a bit of a valuing of all these different goals, where I think in Australia it's more strategically geared towards one objective or another depending on where you are. So, yes.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Apart from nature and blue-green infrastructures, we also have been hearing about the world of mining. And my first guest in this topic, Mohan Yellishetty from episode 17, he and I have been collaborating on some projects because when you combine mining and blue-green infrastructures, there's possibility to do some amazing work, especially around abandoned mines. And here's what Mohan asked me.
Hello, Peter. Thank you for this lovely opportunity. I really enjoyed through and through, and I'm so excited. I wanted to ask, now that you have become an expert of mining, having listened to the whole story, where do you see the intersection of your research to the research that I've been speaking, and what impact that could create for the world to become a better place for everyone?
Oh, geez. And I guess you can take this question in a more general sense as well. I mean, I guess I've ventured into mining, but also a few other topics. But that's a very good question. You know, if we're going to tackle a lot of these challenges our world is facing, we need to be able to think in intersections or synergies. I guess the key, and this is why I got interested in the topic of mine rehabilitation, has been because I think there's a lot of opportunity for the reuse of these spaces. And I think in a city, if we're developing and evolving our cities, we need to start thinking about multifunctionality of spaces. And with space being a very scarce resource, I think, you know, the opportunities in rehabilitating or repurposing these abandoned mines are endless. I think that's why I thought of this as a really nice area to think about the intersections in, because in a way it offers us that canvas. It offers us something we can then really play with. Yeah, and I think this will pop up with many other disciplines as well as I start to learn a bit more about what people do in those other disciplines.
So lovely. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. I think so many fascinating things that I learned being in collaboration with you. And you are such a wonderful colleague, a very collegial genius, and so on.
Thank you. One other common element across many episodes of the show is this idea of circularity, going from a sequential way of doing things to something that's closing the loop, whether it's in water or whether it's in materials and resources. Mohan on his episode said that metals are infinitely recyclable. We revisited that quote in episode 41 with Don Weatherby, who is recovering platinum and palladium from end-of-life catalytic converters. His question relates to the circularity and also gave me a bit of a chance to reflect on how this applies to many other areas that we've covered on the show. Take it away.
So we've talked a bunch about your part. How do you see the world responding to these growing demands in that? What's your perspective as you've talked to all these different people and groups?
Growing demands in something in particular?
Just on environmental, the need for recycling, those pieces of how our industry is working. How do you see, based on others that you've talked to?
I think it's a very interesting question, which requires me to also reflect on how many episodes I've done in regards to that. I think, you know, the solutions we have for the challenges in the world are going to come from different angles. You're going to have, we call it technology or infrastructure. You know, that's going to be based on some innovation in the more, I guess, engineering and technological field, or in the more natural fields with, as we're seeing with nature-based solutions. And then you're going to have solutions that I think are more non-structural. And I think there's going to be demands for all of them. And the key will be to understand the balance between them. So I think, you know, whether it's recycling, regeneration, or placing new infrastructures or working with new technologies, I think we understand the world well enough, you know, in terms of the early adopters and the laggards and how people embrace it. And I think people will embrace it. But I guess very hard to say in what form it'll be and how that balance might look like. But I think I'm certainly optimistic that if we keep bringing in these sustainable practices, I think there'll be adoption in some form or another. And it's about then adaptively managing the demand or adaptively improving upon it day by day.
Well, that is very encouraging to hear.
Yeah. No, thank you for the question. It's amazing how fast technology is advancing, especially AI now in today's world. But other than AI, there are so many other things that have improved our livelihoods in the past decade. And the question begs to be asked, do we have enough technology? We've had this theme on the show before, where it's not necessarily the technology that needs to be advanced, but more other aspects. But here's a curious question from Yannick Back from episode 35.
I think one obvious question is maybe with all the technologies that are available right now, how would you change the world?
It's a very interesting point. And I think on many episodes, we've had that discussion as well. I think the technology is there. Maybe we keep bringing out new tech, but unless we change the mindsets, much like we've discussed in our episode, unless we provide the economic and the societal solutions to implementing them, maybe the familiarity with the new technology, with the people using them, I think maybe that is the priority that we should be focusing on. And you see this in the water space. We've had some episodes that cover that, you know, the institutional capacity to implement these new ideas. I think that's something we don't focus enough on. I think it's something that needs the experts in the technical domains to also participate in, because otherwise this knowledge transfer will not happen. So I think that's probably the key. And I think we still need technological advances, because any scientific advances and technological advances can lead to more efficiency in using them, or maybe an ease of using the technologies. But I think we need to approach this from a multi-lens approach, multidisciplinary approach, and also the more softer side. So the economic numbers as well as the social acceptance or the social receptivity towards them.
Yeah, good answer.
If you're interested in this particular discussion, you can also tune in to Matt Santamoris on episode 16, where we talk about the economic question, or Françoise Bichai from episode 22, where we talk more about the social side. I think technology has advanced greatly, and we need to do a lot more in these areas if we want to implement that knowledge, that technology, to make a difference in the world. Moving on. Modeling is my tool of choice. I do a lot of modeling work to help cities embrace and better plan nature. And modeling itself comes with a lot of headaches sometimes. And when you're developing your own models, that becomes especially, shall I say fun, for lack of a better word. Here's what Peter van Wallichem, all the way back from episode 5, asked me to reflect upon.
It's my turn.
It's your turn.
Should be a good one, huh?
Should be. Well,
I'm just going to reflect on my own experience as a PhD student and ask you something about your experience on this. I remember when I was programming my software that I was using in my PhD, that I had sleepless nights because a bug didn't get solved, and I was working at night just in my bed to try to solve it. So how do you deal with how did you learn how to sleep after working on a program that didn't want to work? Or did you always find the bug before you went to sleep? And was that late before you could sleep?
I can certainly relate to that. And well, it's pretty hilarious because I have encountered my fair share of bugs. No, I did not solve them on the spot, but I do remember sleepless nights or even late nights because you just don't want to leave until you've solved it, or you don't want to stop. So, yeah.
But did you stop earlier? You have an objective of I'm going to sleep by 11 or something. You don't work till 11 because that's not going to work, because there'll always be a bug just before you want to go to sleep, right?
Well, there were times when I said, no, I have to sleep. And there were other times where I said, no, I refuse to sleep until I find it. And, half the times the worst ones were literally just typos.
Yeah. We're not going to go on what bugs can be like. It's terrible sometimes.
No, definitely. But it's a good opportunity for reflection of bugs.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about bugs is that in wastewater treatment, we say that the bug should be in the treatment plant, not in your software.
That's a good thought. I'll have to think of that. Maybe in biodiversity as well.
Yeah, all related.
Before we go into the next question, I first need to say a few words and reflect on the podcast journey. In particular, due to an event that happened last year, and made me really reflect on how much the podcast has done for me personally. Anas Ghadouani, our guest from episode 11, sadly passed away in May 2024. He was an incredible force and inspiration to many of us, and in particular a great storyteller, being able to connect seemingly distant topics into an entertaining and engaging narrative. I've known Anas since 2010, so it's been a while. Not as long as others, but definitely a good amount of time. And during my time in Australia, we always had the chance to catch up, be it in Melbourne or Perth, enjoying good dinners together, sharing jokes. I got the chance to visit Anas in 2023 when I was in Australia, and to record his episodes and to really hear his journey beginning from early days. The episode itself remains one of the most important episodes for me, teaching me a lot about having fun in what I do, reminding me to do so, telling engaging stories, and just a moment of reconnection with an inspirational figure from my early days of research. Anas, you are dearly missed by many, and I am truly grateful to have gotten the chance to capture your journey on the show and to be able to share that force of inspiration with the world. The news came suddenly across continents, but has given me even more conviction to make this show better and better every day, and to inspire many people to live their life to the fullest and to enjoy life's journey. Anas is not around anymore to hear this episode, although being spiritual myself, I do believe he may be listening in, you never know. But here's the question he asked me.
Pete, I have a question for you. It's a bit of a cheeky one. When will researchers stop writing yet a new model?
That is a cheeky one.
Because I tell you why, the context of this question is that I do reviews for grants, for example, and every time I get someone writing and go like, this is the first model that is gonna solve this problem that you've been, and I can compile the number of times where someone says this is the first and the only model. So what is it with researchers and the first model or the last model? Or that's why I asked the question, when are we gonna stop writing yet another model?
I once had a very similar discussion with a colleague who I'm also trying to get on the show at some point, and it was more in terms of the last paper in a discipline. When does a discipline end?
It's a great... I love that question.
And we were also thinking we could always write urban drainage, the final paper.
The final paper,
But to come back to the modeling question, I guess, are we ever going to, finish with models? I think we have a lot of models, but models are a reflection of the reality that was there when we developed them.
Yeah.
Much like we have mental models, I think in our heads, our worldview changes with time. And I think, I've engaged on quite a few interesting discussions around models. And I think as computational power increases, we often open up new doors and opportunities. So who knows, I guess in line with our episode, maybe we won't need to do this anymore.
I think something that you do very well is that your approach is that you make models work with models. So in a way, you're adopting this notion of collaborative modeling, but you make models interact with others. And I love that approach, because to me, that actually is really good, because, some of them are numerical, some of them are this and that. And I think that's a really powerful approach, because, again, there is no perfect model. But if you make models work, there's no perfect human.
Yep.
But if you make humans work together, the outcome at least will be more than the sum of the parts.
Very true.
And I think that's really an interesting approach. But I think there's still that obsession that people have with the perfect model.
Yes.
I'm going to still write the perfect. And I go like, what is the perfect model?
I know it as the model of everything.
Yeah.
But no, that's true. And with the whole craze around digital twins now, I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. But maybe ChatGPT can answer that question for us.
Maybe. All right.
Anas, thank you so much for the inspiration and guidance that you've given me. And I'm truly grateful for all of that. And may you rest in peace. I guess when I'm down, one of the things that really helps is listening to music. When I feel nostalgic or I feel melancholic, then music has this interesting effect on me. And I guess it's a nice segue to get into something that I think really helps me maintain my internal balance. Here's Françoise Bichai from episode 22.
You mentioned that you started playing the piano when you were 4 years old, and I never really actually got a chance to know more about what your journey in music has been. And so I'm wondering, how important has music been in your past, and is it still present to this day, and how?
I love this question, because I think too often I'm trying to find time to just sit down at the piano again and just learn a piece from start to finish. I tend to muck around a bit on the piano, but really sitting down. Okay, so I started when I was 4. My parents thought I should try the piano, and then I got interested in it, and I went through the British curriculum where you go from grades 1 to 8 in recital piano, and you take the exams every year. And in parallel to that, I did theory as well, so music theory is grades 1 to 8. And really the pinnacle of my music career in terms of attaining some kind of qualification was before I went to university. So I finished school in mid of 2005. And I wouldn't start university until the start of 2006. And so the time between when I finished school and started university, I actually prepared and took the diploma exam for piano recital, one of the first levels. And that was because, in a way, my dad was encouraging me to do that. He always believed that, if there's one thing that sets you apart from many piano teachers, and this was always the backup career, in case everything decided to go south and I would come back. Mind you, that doesn't work because Australia is south, so in case everything decided to go north.
that I would have something that would set me apart from many teachers who may have only just finished their 8th grade and would say, we've done the basic series. And so that was really the pinnacle. And it was in classical music, but I was always more of a contemporary, looking for the romantic period contemporary music. My favorite composers would be Ravel and Debussy. So really enjoyed their music. And yeah, I got the diploma. I took the exam. That was nerve-wracking as hell, but...
Do you put that on your CV?
I don't know. I don't think it's on my CV. I should. And then I went to uni, and yeah, as I went more into engineering and deeper into what I practice now, I try and find time to still learn pieces. In undergraduate, it was possible because we had a piano in the student halls, an actual wooden mechanical one, none of these keyboards, even if the keys are weighted. And so I learned a few more pieces and yeah, kept my skills afloat. Nowadays, I don't get much practice. I do have a digital piano at home, and I invested in one in Switzerland with the pedals, with the proper stool, so that it feels like you're actually sitting at a piano. But nothing ever beats sitting at a real piano, let alone a grand piano, which I know costs as much as a house or even a car. So I tend to say, well, okay, I don't think I'm serious enough to buy one, but who knows what the future may hold. So music has been, apart from playing it, has been a very important part of my life because to me, it brings nostalgia. I think interesting quirk about me is when I listen to music, I tend to create a new playlist on Spotify every quarter or every third of the year. And so, songs that I find, songs that I rediscover, they go into the playlists. And so if I ever want to take a trip back into the past, not that we should, they always say it's bad advice, I would pull up one of the older playlists and I just let it run. And if I know there was a period where I was incredibly productive and I know that was the playlist running, I would go back and pull that up and listen to it while trying to do my work. So that is the importance that music
So you found a way to use music to increase your productivity as a researcher.
Maybe,
It's impressive.
yeah, I don't know.
I've done the thing of, going back to the past, using playlists, but not the increased productivity.
Yeah. But I keep a close link to music, and hopefully one day I'll be able to then just sit down and learn a Debussy piece or another Ravel piece.
Yeah.
Or heck, let's go for Gershwin, why not? Or even just jazz improv. That was something that I had the fortunate opportunity to do back in high school in jazz band.
Nice.
Yeah. I can certainly recommend creating playlists of songs that you collect throughout the year. And I do it once per quarter, so I can go back to the spring, summer, autumn, and winter seasons and sort of relive the feelings that I had during that time. And it's an interesting form of therapy, but it also reminds you of mostly the good things that have happened and keeps you going. So try it out if you haven't done it before. As for the piano, I think I certainly need to touch that a lot more. I do muck around, as I've said, but my wife keeps requesting pieces. So I think at some point I'm going to have to make it a habit again. And for those who know me and who have calls on Zoom or Microsoft Teams with me, the piano is literally next to me. So it's just a matter of shifting the chair over and playing the keys. Staying on the topic of music and sound, we have a question from Sofia Boarino all the way back in episode 4, who specializes in sound architecture. And for those who want to get to know Sofia's work in a bit more detail, check out the episode, but also check out the Venice Architecture Biennale this year, as her work was featured in the main exhibition. I got to see it myself in July this year, and the entire exhibition itself is incredibly interesting and on topic. But Sofia, if you're listening in, congratulations on getting into the exhibition and being featured. Here's what Sofia asked me.
Hello, Peter. It's so nice to be here. I'm super happy to have the chance to ask you a question this time. And I would like to link to the theme of my episode on sound architecture and neuroarchitecture, because I just gave an architectural workshop on spatial intimacy, which resulted in a personal research on sound intimacy. And I'm very curious about this topic. I would like to ask you, what are the sounds of your intimacy? What are these soundscapes that make you feel at home? I figure it's a very powerful way of getting to know people, and it's also a very powerful way of putting people in connection with sounds and architecture. as soon as you hear those sounds and you're aware of those sounds that constitute and build your intimacy, then it's very easy to feel attached to them and to specific places. Thank you very much.
Sofia, you stumped me with this question. And so I've had to do a bit of thinking. But if I had to answer it, I have several ways I can answer it. I guess let's start with sounds. And I mentioned this on episode 14 of the show in my discussion with Janine Bolliger, that there's a particular bird whose call I like very much, and that is the Asian quail, also known as the uwu bird because it sounds like it's saying uwu the whole time. Go check it out on YouTube. We'll put a link in the show notes. But every time I hear that sound, I feel a sense of nostalgia. You know, I grew up in Asia and I feel like I'm back in Asia. And so combine that with also the sounds you hear of the rainforest surrounding many of the places that I lived in Asia. You know, that combination, I think, brings back a lot of, I guess, call it intimacy, if you want to call it that. Memories, I guess, would be how I would describe it. There's also the sound of the ocean. I spent a lot of my holidays with my family at the ocean. So hearing the sounds brings back a lot of memories and just also relaxation as well. So in terms of sounds, that would be the first thing that comes to mind and the one with an immediate effect on me. Then there's music. I played piano since I was 4, and there were 2 pieces in my short music career that really had an impact on me. And whenever I hear them again, I immediately get transported back into my past, into that, into that comfort feeling that I felt growing up. The first one would be a piece from Maurice Ravel, the Forlans, which is from the collection Le Tombeau de Couperin. It was a piece that I absolutely fell in love with, very dissonant, but also beautiful at the same time. And it was also the first really advanced piece that I taught myself. So something that I was very proud of. And even today, when I still hear it, it immediately transports me back into that safe space. Then there's another piece, which actually comes from a computer game, The Sims, the very first version of The Sims. So those who played it, you will know that there are a number of piano pieces. And one of them, which I found out later, is actually just 4 minutes of improv. It really captured me, and I absolutely wanted to play that piece. So I remember spending months transcribing that piece by ear until I had finished it. And other than hearing it while building my little virtual house, I later on went on to play it and even perform it back in my school. So 5 things: the Asian quail, the rainforest, the ocean waves, Forlans by Ravel, and The Sims, that really transport me back or really give me that feeling of intimacy or memory. Hope that answers the question. We are almost at the end of this episode, and we have one last question. After hearing this question, I felt that it was a beautiful question to be featured as the final question for this installment of Tables Turned. So here's Wei-Shan Chen from episode 47.
I do have a question I always wanted to ask you.
Oh, always wanted to.
And
you waited to this moment.
Yeah, indeed.
So that everyone else can hear my answer too.
Yeah, indeed. How can you be so active and so positive in so many things all the time? Like I literally never see you being tired, frustrated, sad, or anything. I only see a lot of energy, a lot of ideas, a lot of execution, a lot of outputs, and a lot of enthusiasm. How is that possible for a human being?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the compliment. I'm glad that you see me like that. But I guess to answer your question, and I think and maybe shed some light on it, I think I tried to keep a positive outlook on things. I'm certainly in no way 24/7 active, positive, and so on. Maybe I guess I should be glad that I appear that way sometimes, because I think it gives other people hope. It gives other people motivation. But I go through my fair share of struggles, existential struggles with procrastination. I am just as much guilty of that as everyone else and try to deal with that in my own way. I go through imposter syndrome. I go through self-doubt. I don't know, I guess, because I think if you can push that positivity to others and you can have them see you in that light, it makes them realize that the world is a fascinating place, which it definitely is. And I think that's why I also get interested in so many things and accidentally say yes to so many things. But yeah, I mean, it's not without struggle, definitely. But I think if you remind yourself that if you can give people that smile, give people that motivation, that in itself, I think can help you, because you give someone meaning, even if it's just one person, whether it's through the podcast, helping people share their stories to the world, whether it's through my research, coming up with practical solutions and really touching things from first principles to build confidence. Maybe it's all around that. But I think at the end of the day, I think a lot about how I can at least pass on a positive message, because that also can come back to you in a positive way and keep you going.
That is very true. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you see it that way, but I also do want to highlight, especially to listeners here, that I'm not always in 100% active, happy, and great. I go through a very good amount of struggles myself, and I think that's very real, and it's part of the process. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And that's what I think life is. Life is really about that, and you become stronger, more resilient, only for even bigger challenges to come towards you.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. You try to bring this positive side and things to people to create positive cycles. I think people need it.
Pay it forward, right? That's what they say, because eventually it comes around. What goes around comes around. And if you can then receive positivity back from someone else, I think it also makes you feel beautiful and just that everything is worth doing. And
yeah, that's very true. I like that. Yeah.
Thanks for the question.
Yeah.
Pay it forward. When life gives you lemons, make lemonade or limoncello if you enjoy a limoncello. Thank you, Momo, for asking that question. And it just makes me reflect on how grateful I am for all the people I know, all the people I've met through this podcast, but also through my day-to-day. My journey with my company, Eden CT, just started in February this year, and already over the last few months, I have made some incredible connections, set up incredible collaborations and friendships, and I'm really excited to see where it's going. And this podcast is something that has become a core element of what I love to do, and in a way, a chance to give back to the world and to give back to the people who have given me so much positivity as well. So there's not much more I can say there, but just an endless amount of gratitude from my side as well, and to you as well, listeners, for supporting the show. So thank you very much for all the episodes you've tuned into. I know consistency is still a thing that maybe is not the best, but it is something that I'm producing as a passion project. And I always want to make sure that whenever an episode goes out, that it is an episode that I'm proud of, that the editing is on point, and that each and every one of my guests is proud of the story that they spent time and effort to bring to me as well. So with that, we're at the end of another installment of Tables Turned. Do let me know what you think of this episode, and if you're not happy with certain answers and you want to hear more, or you want me to reflect even deeper, then do let me know as well. Drop me a note, join the LinkedIn group, and get involved in the discussion. And perhaps I'll bring back some of these questions in a third installment, as well as questions from guests we have not heard from yet. But either way, thank you so much for your support, listeners, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Take care. Well, that wraps up our second installment of Tables Turned on the Grand Challenges podcast. I hope that this episode got you curious about the many guests we have had so far on this show, or that you have at least learned a bit more about me, about Switzerland, nature, music, or any other topic we covered. If you enjoyed this episode, I would be incredibly grateful if you could leave a like, follow, subscribe, share, or review the show on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you are listening from. Your support means a lot to me and will allow us to grow this podcast to a broader audience. Through this, the many inspiring stories by our guests can reach many more ears. If you want to join our growing community, you can also check out the Grand Challenges podcast page on LinkedIn. If you're curious about me or my work in general, you can also visit my website or follow me on social media. Head to petermbach.com, my YouTube channel, Peter Marcus Bach, that's Marcus with a C, or follow me on X at petermbach or Instagram at petermbach87. Feel free to get in touch with any feedback or guest suggestions so that I can keep improving this show. This special episode's intro and outro song is called Astral Dance by Jimit. Stay tuned for the next episode and next guest to hear how they are tackling the grand challenges.